I'm Drew Allum with Redline Real Estate, a real estate advisor here. I'm joined by Scott Bollinger, lawyer at Bollinger and Associates, and we are part of the CalgaryHomesale.com podcast series, helping you sell quicker and buy smarter in Alberta. Scott, I think we're going to take it away today. We're going to find out, some ways that you can actually purchase creatively and pretty standard in the real estate market.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So 5 ways to buy an investment property in Alberta. So the first one is the most obvious. That's the standard purchase contract. And that's fairly simple. It's familiar to all agents and all lawyers. It's the one where you've got to go to the bank and get conventional financing or high ratio financing and put together your money to close in 30 to 90 days. The benefits, like I said, it's very simple, familiar to everyone. You don't have to cooperate with the buyer over a long period of time, and you own the property as of closing day. So that's pretty simple. Drawbacks, however, as we might imagine, it's costly to buy a property, and we've got to come up with the full purchase price within 30 to 90 days, depending on how you structure it. The next way to buy a property is by option to purchase. So that way is where a buyer and a seller agree by written contract, that the buyer is granted an option to purchase in the future at a set price or at a price that's set by a formula within the contract. And usually a lease accompanies this type of a contract, so the buyer will often lease the property from the seller in the interim period until they decide whether to exercise the option to purchase. Benefits of this technique are that, buyer doesn't know where the market is going, and they don't want an obligation to purchase. They want the option. So that's something that's interesting. They also could take possession through a lease and then just simply walk away if they wanted to. The drawbacks are there's no ownership interest. You only have a lease at most, and you certainly don't have an ownership interest until you actually exercise that option. The third way to buy a property, buy an investment property, would be by sale and leaseback. So this happens where conventional sale takes place, the title is transferred, and we've got a lease back by the seller. So the seller stays in the home on a lease basis. One of the advantages for a seller in this case is if they're trying to access the remaining equity in their home that they can't get from a conventional lender or even a B or C grade lender, they may be able to access that amount by selling the property back and then not having to move out by retaining that lease. Drawbacks are, as a buyer, if you obtain that property with a lease and the seller doesn't move, you have limited options as to what you do with the property, of course. But it is, on the other hand, you've got a fully leased property, and if the economics work for you, that's something that you should consider. Fourth, vendor take-back mortgage. So you may have heard about this. It's not as common as it might otherwise have been in the past. And one of the reasons is because you need a healthy financial situation from the seller. So you need the seller either to be able to pay off the mortgage that they have on the property or have no mortgage. And then what happens is you purchase the property as the buyer from the seller with only a down payment, not the full purchase price, and then the seller registers a mortgage against the property for the amount that's owing as a difference. And then the buyer makes payments to the seller just as though they were an institutional lender. And so the benefits there are low down payment for the buyer, no standard bank qualification, which we know it's more difficult to get qualified these days, and then typically lower fees on that mortgage. Drawbacks, the seller doesn't get all the money they're selling the property for right away, although they could generate more income over the time period with an interest rate on the mortgage. And then again, the seller needs to be in a healthy financial position. And that's not always the case, as we know, when we're looking at investment properties. So the fifth way to buy an investment property, and then we'll move on to other topics. Agreement for sale. Okay, this is a purchase structure whereby the seller actually finances the buyer, and it's different from a seller take-back mortgage or a vendor take-back mortgage in that the property title does not transfer. The seller's name remains on title for a period of time. The buyer takes possession, and under the structure, sometimes the seller's bank financing can stay in place, which is beneficial to both parties. Benefits of this technique are low down payment for the buyer, again, maybe even zero down payment, again, no qualification or less burdensome qualification, and that the buyer obtains a beneficial interest, which by law is a legal interest in the property. The drawbacks are it can be more complicated than your standard transaction and must be done with some caution and with the right people and the right team in place. So to recap, the 5 ways to buy an investment property in Alberta are: number 1, standard purchase and sale agreement; number 2, an option to purchase; number 3, there's a sale and leaseback technique; number 4, vendor take-back mortgage; and number 5, an agreement for sale.
So if you have any questions or you find it challenging with regards to you looking to purchase a property, or again, want any more information on any of the topics that Scott has covered today, feel free to click on one of the links directly around the video or leave a comment below. More coming up at the CalgaryHomesale.com series. We'll let you know more about how you can sell quicker and buy smarter.